The desert stretched endlessly under a burning sun. His shirt hung loose and torn, more dust than fabric, and his eyes carried the hollow weight of hunger. No home waited for him, no family called his name. Each dawn felt the same, another day to endure, another day to fight the gnawing emptiness in his stomach. By late afternoon he stumbled into a narrow canyon where shadows offered thin relief from the heat. There his weary gaze caught sight of an old native elder, bent with age, leaning on a weathered staff. The elder's hair, long and silver, framed a face lined with wisdom, but softened by years of silence. To most, he was invisible. To some, he was a target. A group of rough settlers lounged near their wagons, their laughter sharp as broken glass. One spat at his feet, another shoved him so hard he nearly fell. The canyon echoed with their cruelty. The boy watched from the shadows, his fists tightening. He had no reason to care, no strength to fight. Yet something inside him, something fierce and unbroken, refused to let the injustice stand. With trembling steps, he pushed forward. "Leave him alone," the boy shouted, his voice cracking but brave. The settlers turned, surprised to see a ragged child challenging them. Laughter turned to anger. A heavy hand struck him across the face, sending him sprawling into the dust. Blood warmed his lip, but he rose again, placing himself between the elder and the men. His knees shook, yet his eyes blazed with defiance. The settlers, disgusted by the boy's stubbornness, finally turned away, muttering curses as they left. Silence fell, broken only by the boy's ragged breaths. The elder, steady and calm, placed a hand on the child's shoulder. No words passed between them, but in that quiet touch, a bond was forged, one that would change the course of both their lives. The fire crackled weakly as night settled over the canyon. The boy sat hunched beside it, knees pulled to his chest, the bruises on his arms and ribs throbbing with every shallow breath. Dust clung to his skin, and his shirt hung in tatters, a reminder of the scuffle he had invited by standing up for someone no one else dared to defend. Hunger gnawed at his stomach, yet the ache in his body was nothing compared to the ache of loneliness that pressed heavier with each passing hour. He wondered if the men who had beaten him were right, if he was nothing more than a stray dog, destined to wander until the desert swallowed him whole. The elder he had defended earlier that day had disappeared into the fading light without a word, and the boy questioned if his small act of courage had meant anything at all. Still, a quiet voice inside whispered that it had been right. He replayed the moment in his head, the shove of the settler, the flash of anger in his chest, the way his body moved before his mind could stop it. He had not fought for reward or recognition. He had simply refused to watch cruelty unfold. The wind carried strange sounds that night, like distant hoofbeats swallowed by canyon walls. The boy lifted his head, straining to listen, but the echoes faded, leaving only the whisper of the desert breeze. Yet unease lingered, setting his heart to a restless rhythm. He lay back against the cold earth, staring up at a sky littered with stars. They seemed close enough to touch, brilliant and endless, as if reminding him that even the smallest life had a place in something vast. The boy's eyelids grew heavy, but his mind refused to rest. Loss had carved emptiness in him. Yet tonight a new question rose in its place. Could one act of defiance change the course of a life? Sleep finally claimed him, fragile and shallow. Somewhere beyond the canyon, 100 riders moved in silence, their path already chosen. By dawn, the boy's world would no longer belong to hunger and shadows. It would belong to destiny, and the test of whether his courage could carry him further than he ever dreamed. The night had fallen heavy across the canyon, cloaking the land in a silence so deep it felt almost sacred. A thin fire crackled weakly beside the boy, its orange glow painting shadows across his bruised face. Every muscle in his body ached from the beating he had taken earlier that day. His lips were cracked, and the stale taste of blood lingered in his mouth. He hugged his knees close to his chest, shivering as the desert's chill crept in, wondering if the world had forgotten him completely. Yet, through the pain, his mind kept returning to the old man. The elder's eyes, calm, steady, and filled with a wisdom the boy could not explain, had looked at him in a way no one ever had. Not as a nuisance, not as a burden, but as something more. He remembered the elder's hand, warm and steady, resting on his shoulder after the attackers had gone. That single gesture carried more comfort than all the words he had heard in his lonely life. Above him, the stars spread wide like a tapestry of silver dust. The boy whispered to them, asking questions with no answers. Why me? Why here? Why now? His voice was swallowed by the vast night, yet he felt as though someone, somewhere, might be listening. His belly growled, but hunger was nothing new. What pressed heavier on his chest was the weight of his own choice, the decision to stand for a stranger when he could have turned away. From the shadows of the canyon walls, a soft sound stirred. The boy's tired eyes darted toward it, his breath catching. For a fleeting moment, he thought he saw movement, the faint outline of riders at a distance, watching, waiting. He blinked, and they were gone, leaving only silence. Perhaps it was his imagination, perhaps not. Sleep came slowly, broken by restless dreams of feathers, fire, and the sound of hooves rumbling like distant thunder. By dawn, he would learn that the world had indeed been watching, and the choice he made that day was about to change everything. The sun was sinking low, bleeding its last golden fire across the canyon when the trouble began. A small group of settlers, rough-faced men with drink on their breath, had gathered near the edge of camp. They laughed cruelly as their eyes fell on the old, native elder making his slow way through the dust. His back was bent with age, his staff shaking with every step. Yet there was a quiet dignity in him that seemed to irritate them even more. Look at the old buzzard, one of them jeered, tossing a stone that landed near the elder's feet. Another shoved him lightly, and when the elder staggered but did not fall, their laughter grew louder. It was the laughter of men who thought no one would dare oppose them. From the shadows, the boy watched. He was small, his ribs showing through his torn shirt, and hunger had made him weak. Yet something inside him stirred with anger, but watching it directed at someone, even more helpless than him, lit a fire he could not smother. Without thinking, he stepped forward. Leave him alone, he shouted, his voice thin but steady. The settlers turned, surprised to see the ragged boy standing there with fists clenched. Their amusement shifted to mockery. And what's this? A little stray pup barking at wolves. One man sneered, stepping toward him. The boy's knees trembled, but he held his ground. He's done nothing to you, he said. If you want a fight, take it out on me. The first blow came fast, a rough fist across his cheek that sent him sprawling into the dirt. Pain shot through his face, but he scrambled back up, eyes blazing. They shoved him down again, kicked dust at him, laughed at his defiance. Every time he fell, he rose once more, not because he thought he could win, but because walking away would mean betraying the only scrap of courage he had left. At last the settlers grew bored. Muttering insults, they spat on the ground and wandered back to their fire. The boy lay gasping, blood at the corner of his mouth, his small frame trembling with exhaustion. Then, gently, a hand touched his shoulder. He looked up and met the calm, ancient eyes of the elder. No words passed between them, but in that silent moment, a bond was forged, one born not of blood, but of bravery. The night stretched endlessly across the canyon, heavy with silence, broken only by the whisper of the desert wind. The boy sat by the dying embers of a small fire he had managed to build from scraps of dry brush. His thin arms trembled, not only from the cold, but from the sting of the bruises that mottled his body. Dust clung to his hair and face. Dried streaks of blood on his lip reminded him of the fight he had, picked against men far stronger. Yet, in the quiet glow of the fire, his mind replayed the moment over and over again, the shove against the old native elder, the cruel laughter of the settlers, and his own choice to step forward when every instinct screamed at him to run. He could have turned away, just as the others had. Nobody would have blamed a starving boy for hiding in the shadows. But he had seen the elder's eyes weary, burdened by years, yet still carrying dignity. That look had struck something deep inside him, something he could not ignore. He had leapt between cruelty and its victim, and though the outcome left him broken in the dirt, he knew in his heart that he would make the same choice again. The flames flickered, casting long shadows against the canyon wall. Somewhere above, the stars burned bright, cold and unblinking. He pulled his knees to his chest, whispering to himself that tomorrow he would find food, water, something to keep him alive a little longer. No family, no friends, no place to return to. But he did not know he was no longer unseen. Beyond the veil of darkness, eyes watched from the cliffs. Warriors, silent as stone, had tracked every step, every blow, every act of defiance. The boy, broken and forgotten, had drawn the notice of a people who valued courage above strength, honor above comfort. As the fire dwindled to ash, the fate of the boy was already shifting. Tomorrow, the desert would bring more than hunger and thirst. Tomorrow, the earth would thunder with hooves. Tomorrow, his courage would be tested. Again, this time before an audience of 100 warriors. The boy sat alone near the embers of a dying campfire. His face was bruised, his shirt torn, and his body ached with every breath. But the sting of pain was not what kept him awake. It was the silence, a silence so heavy that every crackle of the fire sounded like a shout against the canyon's emptiness. Still, he whispered to himself, I would do it again. Images flashed before his tired eyes, the settlers laughing, the old native elders stumbling under their cruel hands, and his own small fists raised in hopeless defiance. He knew he had been no match for them, but at least for a moment, he had stood between cruelty and the weak. That thought gave him a strange sense of peace, even as his wounds burned. A faint shuffle of feet echoed in the canyon. The boy stiffened, gripping a stick from the fire as though it were a weapon. From the darkness, the elder appeared, walking slowly with his staff. His wrinkled face glowed faintly in the moonlight, and his eyes, though tired, carried a depth the boy had never seen before. The elder did not speak. Then, with a calm nod, he placed something on the ground, a small pouch of dried meat and a leather flask of water. Without a word, he turned and vanished back into the night. The boy's eyes widened. His throat tightened, not from hunger but from the simple kindness he had just witnessed. With trembling hands, he ate slowly, drank carefully, and for the first time in many nights, tears rolled down his dirt-streaked face. He lay back against the canyon wall, the stars stretching endlessly above him. He felt weaker than ever, but somewhere deep inside, a spark had been lit. He didn't know it yet, but the act of defending that elder had set into motion a chain of events that would change his life forever. The boy closed his eyes, unaware that in the distant shadows, unseen riders watched him from the cliffs, their feathers swaying gently in the night breeze. The night was heavy with silence. The boy sat by the faint glow of his small fire, its weak flames dancing in the desert wind, casting long and fragile shadows against the canyon walls. His lip was split, his ribs ached from the kicks he had taken earlier, and every muscle begged him to give up. He pulled his knees close, shivering beneath the ragged shirt that barely clung to his shoulders. Hunger gnawed at him, thirst burned in his throat, but worse than both was the loneliness. Yet, in the stillness of that night, his thoughts returned to the elder. But his eyes, they had carried a strength deeper than the desert itself. The boy wondered if he would have the same courage when he was old, or if he would even live that long. He thought of the moment he had stood up, when every instinct told him to run, and yet something stronger had held him there. Perhaps it was pride, perhaps it was defiance, or perhaps, for once, he wanted to believe that his life meant something. The fire sputtered, and the cold crept in. The boy lay on the hard ground, staring at the endless stars above. His mind drifted between dreams and pain. Figures hidden in the darkness had seen his act of defiance, had witnessed his fall, and now carried word of it back to their people. When dawn finally touched the cliffs with a golden glow, he dragged himself to his feet, weak but unwilling to break. He did not know that by choosing to defend a stranger, he had changed the course of his life forever. The desert was about to answer his courage, not with silence, but with the thunder of hooves. The night deepened over the canyon. The boy sat hunched beside the dying embers of a small fire he had scraped together from dry twigs. His clothes were torn, his lips cracked, and every bruise from the fight earlier still throbbed like a reminder of his choice. He pulled his knees close to his chest, trying to steal warmth from a body that had little left to give. Hunger gnawed at him, sharper than the chill, but he ignored it. What hurt more was the memory of laughter, those settlers walking away as if his pain was a joke, as if the world had no room for someone who tried to do the right thing. In the shadows just beyond the flicker of the flames, the elder he had defended stood silently, his thin frame blended into the night, his staff in hand, his eyes reflecting the glow of the fire. For a long time, neither spoke. The boy almost believed the man had gone, like everyone else who had ever left him behind. But then, with a slow step, the elder came closer. He crouched down across the fire, his lined face softened by the orange glow, and for the first time the boy noticed kindness in his eyes, kindness mixed with a weight of sorrow. The elder placed a hand lightly on the boy's shoulder. It was gratitude. It was respect. It was acknowledgement. For a child who had been invisible for so long, it felt like the first time someone truly saw him. The boy wanted to ask questions. Who are you? Why didn't you fight back? Why did they hate you? But the words died in his throat. He was too tired, too weak. The elder seemed to understand. Instead of speaking, he took a small leather pouch from his robe, opened it, and placed a piece of dried meat in the boy's hand. The boy stared at it as though it were treasure. When the fire finally burned out, the elder rose. He gave the boy one last look, nodded as if making a promise to himself, and disappeared into the darkness of the canyon. The boy curled into the sand, the taste of food still on his tongue, already been watching, and that his life was about to change forever.